Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 165, with Angelique Albert from the Native Forward Scholars Fund. Great organization, just released a new study focusing on college affordability for Indigenous students. So we talk all about that study, that report, and kind of the issue at hand, sort of more generally. So great conversation. Angelique shared some great resources to check out as well. Just really appreciate her time, all that she shared, and her hard work with her team, showing up every day to support Indigenous college students. So as always, please do fill out our listener survey if you've not already. Check out the merch store to help support the show. And without further ado, this is episode number 165 with Angelique Albert. I am very excited to be here today to have a conversation that's on a little bit of a different topic than what we usually cover, but I'm so grateful for the opportunity to deep dive on something that is very important. Recently released national study on college affordability for Indigenous students. So it's coming out of the organization Native Forward. So we'll get right into it and start out as we always do, though, with introductions, have our guest introduce themselves and give a brief overview of their professional background and how they got to be where they are today.
Nice. Well, thank you, Dustin, for having me. My name is Angelique Albert. I am the CEO of Native Forward Scholars Fund. My background is that I'm a member of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes from northwest Montana. I grew up on the Flathead Indian Reservation there. I attended a TCU, which is a tribal college and university, Salish Kootenai College, for my undergraduate degrees, and then went on to get my graduate degree from Gonzaga University. My career has always been in service to Native people, either at a tribal level or a national level. Primarily, I've worked in the nonprofit space and education, but I've also worked in business, government, and philanthropy. I'm very passionate about higher education, empowerment of our people, and found that the nonprofit space is where I get the most enjoyment. But education for me is really key to social justice, equity, and economic mobility for us as Native people. But I also believe that education is an actionable step that we can take. I think that oftentimes when you hear about disparities in Indian country, we hear about those disparities, but education is a step that we can take towards reducing disparities. I know through my personal challenges that I've gone through in my life, education was that place and that thing that I could do to kind of take that step forward, and it wasn't something actionable. So I'm very happy that my educational experience led me to Native Forward Scholars Fund, because I feel like I'm truly doing the work that I'm meant to be doing in this world. So, and thank you for having me here today.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us here and doing this good work. And yeah, I mean, that's something for me where, yeah, education, while it has so much kind of intricacies and complexities and, you know, that challenge is almost kind of part of the appeal of it and the fulfillment of, figuring out that. And like you said, really kind of having a clear impact on improving people's lives through education. So, just for context, though, for folks, so if you want to explain a little bit about the work that Native Forward does, so we have that before we kind of move on to talk more about the study that you all did.
Sure. Native Forward Scholars Fund is the oldest and largest scholarship provider to Native students in the country. We've been doing this work for about 53 years. During that time, we've been able to empower over 20,000 Native scholars from over 500 tribes in all 50 states. We fund students who are pursuing undergraduate, graduate, and professional degrees in any field of study from any accredited institution. We are proud that we've worked with over 1,700 institutions in this country. We award about anywhere between 11 million and 15 million in direct scholarship dollars to students annually, and then about 350 million since our inception. But even with the amount of funding that we give to students, we're only able to provide scholarships to 18% of the students who apply through us, so that leaves a pretty significant funding gap. I'll say that our alumni include some of the most influential Native leaders in the country, including the Secretary of Interior, Deb Haaland,
Mm.
Cynthia Lamar, who is the director of the Smithsonian's National Museum of American Indian, and then also Fawn Sharp, who is the president of NCAI, and like I said, we have 20,000 scholars. So, and they're all out there doing phenomenal work. Beyond the direct scholarships that we give, we also have wraparound services, and this for us is our secret sauce to getting our graduation rates up so high. Is we have an individual person who's assigned to every student to help them navigate their college experience. And then we also do additional programming such as mentorship, and we do workshops and trainings and leadership programming, and just have a year of different like events and programming for our students. Um, and then I'll say in the most recent years, we're proud to have been able to increase our programming and tailor it to what the students are saying that they need from us. So, in the past couple of years, we've been able to create funding around doctoral research, professional development, testing fees and certifications, and paying for those type of things. But also, we've established a student emergency fund that allowed us to respond to COVID needs, housing needs, food insecurity, and technology needs. So those are kind of the things that we do, and then lastly, um, we see ourselves as advocates for Native students. So really looking at creating more visibility for our students, and to we work with institutions across the United States to help them become more culturally competent so that our students can be successful in higher education.
Yeah, that's really great to hear, just sort of all those ways that you work with students, because that, you know, it kind of makes me think where like those are just like the struggles for any student, but then sort of like you said, kind of contouring and kind of manifesting in kind of the unique, sort of environments and circumstances that Indigenous students face, and you know, finances is one big portion, but then there's just all those other things, especially for first generation students, of just navigating the, you know, very elaborate kind of systems and structures of any college or university. So I've seen uh, programs like this in other contexts just be so impactful, and having that person that's kind of, being that mentor, looking out for you, providing that guidance, and then, yeah, just kind of uh, giving whatever is needed for students, and really adapting that way. But I mean, this report, I know, like, affordability financing for students is, I think, definitely one of those, common roadblocks, and it can really show up in some of those ways, like you said, of just like paying for a certification fee, where it's just like, yeah, I've got a really tight budget, but this is something that I really need, and covering even that, you know relative to maybe other things, like a small expense, but it has a huge impact. So I know that's part of what this national study that you are releasing kind of is talking about, is just sort of college affordability for Indigenous students. So I guess to start, we can kind of like do this kind of in multi parts, because I think it is obviously a lot here. But if you want to just explain maybe like why you kind of went on this endeavor to conduct this study and release it and everything, and then we'll get into sort of the highlights of it.
Sure. I think for us, as we have four um, national Native scholarship providers who collaborated in this effort. And it was truly to create voice and visibility for our Native students. Um, the, the study is really unprecedented, and that it's the first of its kind to really explore college affordability, and how that affects Native students. It's likely one of the largest data sets of its kind, and that this collaboration was between the four large national Native scholarship providers. So first of all, it was us as scholarship providers wanting to collaborate and really create more voice and visibility for our Native students.
That's an interesting part of it, is like maybe like none of you could have gone it alone, and like finding where it's like, hey, we could really do something big if we, pooled our resources together and, you know, those sort of things. Was that like kind of part of it, is just being like, you know, if you or anybody else like kind of had the idea, but maybe we're sort of not sure how to best go about it, and just like it, really being possible when you all kind of were able to work together towards it?
Absolutely. We are always stronger when we're together, and we're all serving Native students in this country. But also, there is an I guess a large concern for us as Native people is that we are always othered. We are
Hmm.
always something else. We are always the asterisks. So when you look at Native research in this country, it's very limited. So we wanted to create a baseline of data that, when we're looking for it, it's difficult to find. But also we wanted to have um, Indigenous research from Indigenous people. So it's for Native-led organizations, but also Native researchers and also Native students. So we surveyed our students and our um, previous and current students. We did interviews with our students. So we feel like this is truly Native research from our perspective and done by Native people. So I think that there's different ways, different things to consider. It's making sure that our students have visibility when we're oftentimes not represented. And so that's a big part of it. But also, absolutely, when we pool our student bases, that's a lot stronger information than if one of us were to do it alone. So it just seemed like a natural collaboration. We advocate for our students in other ways, so it just seemed like a natural thing to do.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, just like outside of all this, just like always love like kind of just good anecdotes like that of just sort of like, the great things that can happen, when you bring a lot of great minds and, people together to collaborate, and, really being like intentional about everything, and yeah, like kind of getting as kind of representative of a group as possible through, this whole network of folks that contributed to this. But so to focus on the kind of findings of the report itself, we'll link out in the description show notes for this episode so folks can read the whole thing themselves. But if you kind of want to tease and maybe sort of the high level highlights of the report that you think are really notable, and then we'll kind of dig in deeper from there.
Sure. I think that the primary finding for this is that the main obstacle for college completion is affordability
Mhm.
and causing overall student attrition. So, and also when you look at the completion rates for our students, they're looking like 36% of our students who are entering a four-year college will complete in 6 years compared to 60% of all other students. So this is kind of something we all know as scholarship providers um, that the main obstacle is that funding. But like you said, when you dig into the study, it really you truly get a feel of the college going experience from a Native perspective and some of the challenges that they're going through. But that is the thing that we've known for years, but it's nice now to have it quantified and to have the data to back it up. It's just college affordability it's the main obstacle.
Yeah, and I mean, as much as kind of what you were explaining before, where it's like maybe helping with incidental cost or having that emergency fund, like all those things are important. But then it is sort of like, you know, tuition is very expensive. It's too expensive, and that there's not really been uh, large scale efforts through uh, state funding or federal funding, to address that really. So um, yeah, I mean that's something where again like you are able to kind of highlight the uh, experiences of indigenous students with this issue that impacts all students. So it, like you said, sort of affirms something that a lot of people would probably be able to articulate anecdotally, but really adds a lot of that shape to what these particular students are experiencing. And uh, what again you can kind of contour maybe to their needs and everything. But um and I think, yeah, just that idea where like I've been thinking a lot about over these past couple of years, because there's like different organizations out there that are really earnestly trying to address that, stop out student problem, where there's all these students out there that have some credits but no degree, and then potentially a lot of debt to go along with it. So
Exactly.
um, I think that just really adds to it, of, again, like sort of the transformative power we know for education, but that so many people have almost gotten like really the like lose scenario where, like, certainly the learning that you gained, is valuable and important, but like to get jobs and stuff, like, unfortunately, you just need that credential. That's what's going to translate and get you towards, uh, whatever kind of goals you have, more gainful employment and everything. So, um, and I guess just like one kind of brief follow up, because I think, like, knowing that, you know, objectively, affordability is this, really predominant issue for Indigenous students. Was there anything surprising to you about, like, maybe the extent of it or the shape that it took, or just anything like with this study, something that was really kind of surprising, since, like, you mentioned that it kind of affirmed something that you suspected. But was there anything to these findings that surprised you?
Yeah, I would say that the thing that stood out to me is when you put all of the data points together, you do get that experience of what our Native students are going through. You get a strong sense that there's a family responsibility. There's a responsibility not only to provide your cost of attendance, but also to provide income for your family. And it really, the study goes into income levels, at 20,000 a year and 30,000 a year, and our students are trying to provide core basic needs, as well as cost of attendance. And that, you brought it up, it results in debt accrual. And this study goes into what types of debt and how much debt. And it's unnerving that it's not just student loans that they're getting. It's, credit card debt and personal debt and personal loans, and also goes into the amounts that our students are taking. So um, it, the thing that struck me about it that was surprising to me is that this is the same experience I went through 25 years ago when I was going to college. I was providing for my family and trying to get the core basic needs while trying to go to school and having such a low income. Um, it was surprising to me that we're sitting here 25 years later and our students are going through the same exact thing. So, the other things that kind of stood out um, was that just the rate at which students are running out of money is extremely high. 72% of our students run out of money within this, every 6 months. And then 50% are experiencing food insecurity. And the one that hit kind of hard was the 16% are experiencing homelessness.
Mm.
So I know from, working with students that, I have a student who made the decision to live in their car just so that they could afford tuition and all of that. And so I knew that to be a rare case, but I didn't realize that it was 16%. So, so you really get a feel of the how extreme the situation is when you look at the numbers.
Well, and I think too, like, it's good to kind of capture, I think, at this moment in time too, where I think, like, we are sort of quote unquote post COVID, but, still around as of the recording of this episode. But
Hmm.
sort of, there was so much that kind of, you know, through these turbulent times, like, it exacerbated problems. But then, like, for me, as the eternal optimist, like, it really showed us what was possible when we were using those sort of levers of, state and federal funding to kind of give resources to people to, provide healthcare, provide even modest sort of, like, the stimulus checks and everything, kind of like, that is sort of a form of like universal basic income. Like, if you met parameters, like, you just got money, like, here you go, and use it to buy whatever you need. There's really no stipulations on it. And then, you know, uh, I know some places where, like, utilizing hotels that were just vacant to just, like, let's just put people, in shelter, like, and
Yes.
just seeing, where we can provide hotspots and computers and like all this stuff, where it's just like, that's one of my takeaways, where it's like, okay, so, like, any of the naysayers who thinks that, it's not possible, like, we can do stuff like this when we just garner the willpower to commit and follow through and do it. And then just like, I've been saying this a lot to people too. It's just kind of like, and it might seem like silly to people, but like use our imagination, like let's get creative and figure out like what is going to be, an effective way to do this, and just imagine what's possible. Cause I think sometimes like, you know, into the kind of dry idea of like, legislation and all that, it's like, hey, let's use our imagination here, guys. Let's because I think like sometimes we get tunnel vision where it's like, oh, it's just this, like that's, it's either this or nothing. And it's like, maybe, or we could think through like how can we get money to people or get resources to people so that they can have what they need and not need to worry so much about kind of what you were detailing, like family obligations and housing and food and all this stuff where it's like something else is like going to college should be kind of like this equalizing factor in the sense of like if you're able to get to campus, it's like they've got a health center, they've got like a computer lab, they've got all this stuff, but then like they're only able to kind of get their head above water. These students that are struggling, with college affordability, like they can get their head above water just ever so briefly, but then it's like they just drown under everything else where like they can't even like take advantage of all these, supports and stuff. Like you said, like, with a good chunk of students that are just sort of, running out of money after a pretty short period of time. So yeah, it's just tough. But I think like I stay optimistic about this, and I don't know how it sort of strikes you, but just sort of like the idea where it's like in very recent, memory, we were able to do really large scale supports for people all over this country to, address a lot of those basic needs. So it's like, okay, like how do we figure out how to do this again?
Absolutely, and I feel you on that. I feel like the one thing that we're taking personally from this study is to take the data and put it to use in an effective way. So, just to give you an example, when we were looking at the amount of debt that the students are taking on, 52% of the students are taking $5,000 or less. So, for us at Native Forward, our scholarships start at 2,500 and then go up from there. But that gives us a goal to say, oh, if we could get it up to $5,000, we can reduce the debt of 50% of these students if we could get
Hmm.
that scholarship, that minimum scholarship up to 5,000. So that kind of helps inform us on how we can actually use the information in an effective way that can impact our students in a we can kind of start to move the needle on some of these numbers. So I think it is just having the knowledge to be able to know the best ways to serve our students. So I'm with you on that. I think that it's important that we figure out ways to effectively serve our students and make it so they don't have to take on so much debt.
I'm kind of the, I guess, pragmatist as well of just sort of like, don't have perfect get in the way of good, and like how
Mhm.
sometimes they support programs, if it's like, okay, there's going to be like income restrictions and it's only a certain amount, we've seen that with, as of the recording of this episode, recently announced student debt loan relief where, it's a very targeted effort. And certainly some people are saying, well, it should have been more than that, but they're sort of using the levers that they had to do something. But I think we've seen that in a lot of different ways as well. Just sort of like kind of a compromise to at least like get something done. But yeah, I mean, it is like just realizing where it's like, wow, if we can kind of address that funding gap that these students have, and that could have a huge impact. And I think it makes me think too of where things like Pell Grants have just like been languishing in terms of their the amount that they actually cover in terms of the cost of attendance for students, and just like how portable they can be in terms of like what they can be used for in terms of just like now all the different educational opportunities that students can partake in, whether it's just different like short courses or boot camps or certificates or, all these sort of things. So as we're kind of winding down, like all this that we've kind of talked about, like, I think we've sort of proposed maybe some different sort of solutions or, maybe already like we know kind of what works and we just need to kind of fund it more, sort of, spread it out. But like what do you hope comes of this research for folks that read it and that it's kind of been out in the world and stuff? So yeah, what do you hope comes of all this?
I hope that people take the research, that they read it, that they utilize it in a way that serves our students. I know that I talked a lot about the challenges and disparities, but in the report, you also get a view of like what are those primary indicators of success, and it goes into that as well. So when you talk about the top three indicators of success for our students are, you know having a cultural experience as part integrated into the higher ed experience, understanding budgeting, and to your point you brought up earlier, did your parents go to college? So it talks about these are the three indicators of persistence and success for our students. So what can we be doing, I guess, utilizing that in a meaningful way, as well as some of those other data points. And I feel like there's something in this research for anyone in higher education, anyone who is serving Native students in education, period. For high schoolers, you could be ensuring that they understand financial literacy. If you're working for a university, making sure that you have culturally competent curriculum and professors on staff. You can um, take action to reduce the debt, or to implement tuition waivers for Native students. And I think there's so much that anyone who's interested in serving Native communities can take and utilize the data. If you're in philanthropy, and you can see where the needs are, so you can use that to really guide what you're doing and how you're serving Native students. So basically, please read the research, use the research, and better serve our Native students.
Yeah. Well, I almost like just the simplicity of that, of just sort of like, use this to help students, please. Like, because it could be like getting into the interest, of like, well, I hope that Congress can pass this. Like, what it's like, yes, that is an example of just sort of the core tenets of like, let's, not be quiet about this. Let's get this out there, keep it top of mind, and use it to better the lives of Indigenous students. So, love it. So, on this topic, if there's any resources from Native Forward or anywhere else that you'd want to share, stuff that's relevant to this topic, stuff that's grabbing your attention, just kind of give you the opportunity to share those out now so that we can put them in the show notes.
Absolutely. So for us as the National Native Scholarship Providers, we have Native Forward Scholars Fund. We have resources on our website. There's American Indian College Fund, um, American Indian Science and Engineering Society, as well as IEI, Indigenous Education Organization. So there's the four of us. So please visit our website. We have a ton of resources for students and people wanting to get involved. I will say, if you're interested in knowing of what's going on in Indian Country Today is a great resource just to know what is going on currently in Indian Country. Um, I would love to make a recommendation for books. Joy Harjo is just a beautiful poet, and then Winona LaDuke is an amazing author that really focuses on um, the economy, natural resources, and for us as Native people, I think it's important to always keep that top of mind. I know with a lot of our STEM funding, we provide support to Native students who are in environmental sciences and that. So I would encourage anyone to reach out to our four organizations and and to just whenever you're considering including Native people to reach out and ask us to join in the conversation like you are today. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. So, then we will end now with our closing question, as we always like to wrap up with. I think we've had a lot of great sort of final thought worthy things shared already, but just, yeah, whatever's kind of, sitting with you here as we end the episode, whatever final thought or call to action on this topic that you want to share to wrap everything up.
I would say that again, like this research was done because we have historically been othered. We have always been the asterisk. So this is the baseline. this is the baseline, and we as the National Native Scholarship Providers intend on utilizing this information to promote kind of a more effective practices for our students, but also to do additional research and continue to kind of share the information. It's really about serving our Native students in an effective way. So the call to action is for we're asking all institutions of higher ed, anyone who is serving Native students or wants to serve Native students, to please um, embrace this Native Indigenous research, to embrace it, to implement it, and to look at our recommendations and implement that.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's a great place to end the conversation here. And as always, we'll have ways to connect with our guest and their work in the show notes and everything that we mentioned. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just so grateful for this opportunity to sort of signal boost what you all are doing in this report. And yeah, just thank you so much for taking the time and sharing all that you did.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.